Let's talk slop. When polysynths were first coming out in the late 70s, early 80s, everyone praised them for their warm and rich and gritty tone. The designers of these synths created them so that each voice was as precise as possible. They wanted them to be perfect. Every single time you hit a new key, you would know exactly how it would sound. And they went to great engineering lengths to pull this off. And mostly, they got it. These synths were what we called voltage controlled. That meant that analog circuits were converting power from your wall into something that the oscillators could read and the ADSRs and the filters could read. But the thing is that every single time you hit a note, it's almost like it's going through a new synthesizer, because these are what we call voices. You hit one key down, it goes through one channel. You hit another key, it goes through a completely different channel. And even though these were the best engineers in the world, using the best technology in the world, there were still micro variances. Anyone who's ever used these knows that you need to turn them on and you need to warm them up. Wait 20, 30 minutes for all of the circuits to really settle in. Then you might need to tune them a little bit. But the thing is that you're sort of tuning an average of the voices, because one voice might be a little this way, another voice might be a little bit this way, and you're sort of tuning the average. We like this sound. This is what a lot of people spend a lot of time and money chasing after. So even the best engineers in the world with the best technology in the world still introduced this micro variance, and this creates a sound that was almost unintended, but people's ears really responded to. It sounded good, it sounded warm, it sounded analog. Now, engineers do what engineers do, so even though people seem to really enjoy this warmth and subtle imperfection in the sound, this was unintended. This is not what they wanted. So they created what are called digitally controlled analog synths. Rather than relying on analog circuits to convert the power and then tune them, they would have a little computer which would take in the signal, listen to the oscillator as it currently is, and then calibrate it accordingly. This created an almost perfect alignment of all of the voices, which is what they were originally intended. But guess what? People didn't like it as much. It sounded a little too clean, a little too digital. Even though it was a completely analog circuitry, people said it sounded like a digital synth. So then these incredibly smart engineers needed to go in the opposite direction. They needed to introduce variance again, and they created what we call slop. Their first iteration of slop introduced a little bit of randomness. So every time you hit the key, it would be a random off by a little bit. And this got a lot closer to what people were looking for, but it wasn't exactly the same, because an original synth, it was a reproducible variance. Every time you hit voice 8, it would be off by just a tiny bit in the same way. And every time you hit voice 1, it would be off in just a tiny bit the same way. So more recent iterations of slop are not random. They actually pull from a database this value and they bring it off by that amount, and then you can sort of tune a percentage based on that. This is what Sequential Circuits has introduced with its somewhat recent vintage mode in the OB6 and the Prophet 6. With our synth, we carefully measured 12 different original analog polysynths, from Prophets to Junos to Oberheims, and we created this database, which is exactly what we measured and then reproducible for any patch that you bring it to. You can scroll through and you can change different models, and then you can dial in a percentage based on how off you want it to be. It's deeply overlooked in the world of digital synthesis. And when people are really trying to pull off that warm analog tone, they often miss this, which is to us the secret ingredient.